The Steam Deck has been an absolute game changer in terms of PC hardware, but what if Valve made a console? One that plugs into your TV and one that you can sit down and play in the 10-foot experience. Their interface is set up for that, and if Valve brought over the whole SteamOS, like, it's a PC, it's also a console thing, and that could be a huge game changer for PC gaming as a whole. And truthfully, there have been rumors swirling for the last 2 years or so about something called Valve Fremont, which is exactly what I just said. Recently, sadly, it's Bradley over on X pointed out that Valve's Fremont hardware has leaked on Geekbench, and we actually have CPU metrics and some other interesting details over on Geekbench that we can take a look at. So that's what I'm going to do in this video. And if you haven't seen it already, I'm doing live streams, and I'm actually recording this as a live stream right now. So I'm going to interact with some of the comments here. And if you've missed live streams, you can check them out. I'm doing them almost every day, 4 times a week at least. But without further ado, let's get into the actual Geekbench metrics here. All right, so here you can see, sadly, it's Bradley saying Valve Fremont appearing on Geekbench for the first time. So here we have the Valve Fremont. These are the leaked details here, and we have a score of 2412 for a single core and a multi-core score of 7451, and this was produced a couple of days ago on August 19th. If we scroll down, though, we can see that the operating system is actually Windows 11 Pro 64-bit, and it also has a motherboard named Valve Fremont. If we scroll down some more, we can see there's AMD custom CPU 1772. So here we can see the comparison head-to-head between the Valve Fremont and the Galileo, which is the Steam Deck OLED. And you can see here this was run on January 4th, 2024, and this was run just last week. We have the custom CPU 1772 for the Fremont, but we have a custom APU 0405 for the Steam Deck OLED. We have a base frequency of the Fremont of 3.2 gigahertz, and on the OLED it's 2.8. There's 4 cores on the OLED, there's 6 on the Fremont. We're running at a clock speed of 4,792 megahertz, and on the OLED we're running at 3.4, almost 3.5 megahertz. And yeah, we have Hawkpoint 2 for the codename and Van Gogh for the codename for the Steam Deck OLED. If we scroll down a little bit more, we can actually see some more interesting information. For example, the memory size of the Fremont is only 7.89 gigabytes versus the 11.85 gigabytes of the OLED here. And we have a transfer rate of 5587 megatransfers a second, DDR5 SD-RAM, and it's 2 channels. Now, I find this suspicious. I don't think Valve would release hardware in 2025 with only 8 gigabytes of RAM, even though there are reports of a dedicated RX 7600 GPU in here. And sadly, it's Bradley is reporting that it's also not shared RAM. Even still, 8 gigabytes is pretty low, and I think the minimum Valve would do here is probably closer to 32 gigabytes. This could be like a test sample or something like that that someone got their hands on, because I also don't think that Valve would release this or allow this kind of leak to happen. I mean, Valve is notorious for intentionally leaking things. I think this spec right here precludes it from being an intentional leak, because this is just too low. So the thing is, 16 gigabytes is like the minimum that Valve would release. I think 32 is close to reasonable. Maybe they could even do something like 24 gigabytes, which is something like Apple's doing, but I don't know if that's even like feasible on a x86 CPU. But there is a second Fremont benchmark that's not getting as much attention. It happened before, about 20-ish minutes before the other one, and it's getting a lot less detail. I don't know how interesting this is, honestly. If we scroll down, I mean, you compare them, it's about 100 or so points off in the single core and 300-ish off in the multi-core score. There's not a whole lot of other details here. However, sadly, its Bradley has reiterated that it's a custom motherboard and case, and it has a dedicated RX 7600 GPU. If it has an AMD Radeon RX 7600, is that like soldered onto the motherboard, or is that a discrete GPU? I'm interested to see how this actually turns out, because if this has a discrete GPU, then that will mean that there is expansion in the Fremont. At least, hypothetically, expansion is available. It would also mean that SteamOS would need to necessarily be updated to support discrete graphics cards. Because at the moment, right now, if you have a discrete graphics card on SteamOS proper, I believe it doesn't, it'll use it, but it doesn't report the correct GPU. So Stupid Fox says the old Steam machines did come with dedicated GPUs, didn't they? And that is true, but the problem is, I think Valve's first approach for SteamOS and the Steam machines, they recognize as flawed, and they're not going to go back into that, at least not until they've established SteamOS as the gaming OS. Plus, they're making this with a custom motherboard, so I think that there is a more than 50% chance that the GPU is going to be on board. And also, if it's integrated right into the motherboard, there are optimizations that can be done to increase the resizable bar or the bandwidth between the two. I think that there's a lot of optimizations that could be done here. Now, I'm not a hardware expert, and I don't have the first idea of what I'm actually talking about, obviously, but it's fun to speculate anyway. How is Valve going to differentiate this from the consoles? And I've already kind of touched on this, but essentially, Valve has the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck has differentiated itself from other handhelds by being a PC in the handheld space. And it's also differentiated itself from other handheld PCs by being a console, right? And also by having a superior user experience for managing your games, launching your games, etc. The question is there a demand for set-top gaming, right? Are there console gamers out there who want to replace their Series X or their Series S or their PlayStation 5 with a dedicated PC console hybrid? I don't know. How could Valve actually usurp the dominance of the PlayStation 5 specifically? Well, on my podcast this week, we talked about how PlayStation is upping the price by $50 on each of their SKUs. $50. I come from a time where throughout the lifetime of a console generation, the price of the console goes down. We don't live in that world anymore, it seems, where, everything is driven by greed by these companies. But that greed is their weakness, and Valve, I think, might have learned the lesson that they can subsidize the cost of the hardware to make it back on the back end. And if Valve does that, and if they aggressively price this machine so that it undercuts, a Series X or a Series S or a PlayStation 5, I think that there is a great opportunity here for them to undermine the console space and to get in with PC gamers in the living room. Switch to Linux says you're not seeing the big picture here. I would love my PlayStation 5 to emulate, but it just can't. Now, the thing is, Switch to Linux, that is a very PC perspective. That is not something that I think a lot of console gamers are going to give a crap about. Most of the lifetime console gamers I know do not care or don't even know what emulation is, beyond Xbox back compat. And they don't know it as emulation, they know it as backwards compatibility. But the thing is, I think you have a point there. There's going to be a subset of PC gamers who will definitely want a Fremont in their living room, and maybe have a console, like a gaming PC in the other room where they can stream their online games from their Windows box to their living room. That's a possibility. Now, the other thing about a potential Fremont release is that if they do that, they're probably going to have to pair it with the release of a Steam controller too. And we've actually seen designs for that leak. Here's a Gaming on Linux article about that. And this is like a proper design. I think that this looks incredibly comfortable, and I am very interested to give this a try. I'm a huge controller nerd. I love controllers. I geek out about them. You can see I have a whole playlist about controllers up here that you guys can watch. I did a whole live stream where I like tried a whole bunch of different controllers on the Steam Deck. I love controllers. Now, I would love to see this controller in my hand. I'd love to get my hands on it. I'd love to play around with it. And I think that this could be really awesome for living room gaming, especially PC games on a TV here. So I'm very excited about a potential for not just Fremont in the living room with SteamOS, but I'm also excited for the almost inevitability of a Steam Controller 2 coming alongside it. Now, I have a few questions for you guys. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. The first one is, where do you think the leak of the Fremont specs or the Geekbench results came from? Geekbench, I believe, is based in Taiwan, which would mean that if this is being manufactured in Taiwan, maybe one of the factory workers got one and took it home and started messing with it. Who knows, right? I don't think this came from Valve. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. The other thing is, what are you excited about in terms of Steam Controller 2? What are the features you'd love to see on a Steam Controller 2? Let me know in the comments. And finally, what would you like to see on for Fremont, and why do you think it's running Windows 11 in the Geekbench results? All of these things I am very excited to read your comments on. I know that there are some folks who are sounding off on the live chat. But with all that said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you all have a great day. Now, I want to give a special shout out to all the folks on Patreon, my YouTube members, and the folks who've subscribed to the Bryant blog. They got their name listed over here by becoming members. If you'd like to get your name listed over here, you can make a pledge, monthly pledge with the links down below. It's all greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.